All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here to yet another Werewolf Technical Steering Committee meeting. We have a relatively short agenda today. Um, we'll go through action items for the two BOFs that we're looking at, and then CIQ's ongoing ask about common room integration. And then on our discussion agenda, we have the current state of the 462 release and the provision to disk, maybe a little bit more discussion on common room if we don't finish it up there. And then I wanted to bring up a question of potentially reducing the number of images that we publish um, in the Werewolf Node Images repository. But anything else that people would like to add to the agenda before we get started? All right. Hearing nothing. So current state of the PEARC 25 BOF is that we have Rose reports that she has agreement from George Washington University to be um, our community site that will present their deployment. I think we have 15 minutes on the schedule for that. So the rest of it's just on us, and I'm out next week, but hopefully sometime in the very near future we'll have or maybe we'll just take one of these meetings to plan off and make sure we're all on the same page for that. But I'll ping Rose about that. And then similarly, for SC25, we are planning to participate in the Open HPC BOF. So they have also gotten agreement for participation from the Confluent team and there's another one. Who was it? I forget now. Another like provisioner team. Now I remember. It's um, I remember who it is now, but I forget the name of the project. It's like a more general purpose thing. Open Chamois, that's what it is. They're gonna send people to at least to say that they will participate for purposes of getting a proposal in. So hopefully, with our powers combined, we'll have a good SC25 proposal for a shared BOF that we'll get to all participate in. Any questions or feedback on either of those or recommendations for things we should do to further prepare while I mark down Jeremy as present? All right.
I was going to say
Oh,
only you might want to we can coordinate with it later, but also we don't know if OpenHPC was planning to do any other events at the show.
at the SC25 show?
Yeah.
What kind of events do you mean?
We've always had a after hours get together
Oh, okay.
at SC. I don't know if we'll be doing that this year. Just that comes down to I'd say the funding and other work being done too with what's the other program? The HP is it HP?
HPC Syspros or whatever that's called.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Software Foundation.
That HPSF.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's something to look at and to consider when moving forward if that's something we want to do.
Yeah. Good idea. And then for our last kind of pending action item, Rose has delivered a document describing what CIQ's relationship and commitment would be should this committee choose to allow integration with a CIQ runs common room instance with the Warewulf Slack. So I have that here. My intent is to pull it up in a share when we get down to that in the agenda discussion. But we could discuss it now if people would prefer. Um, in fact, you know what? Let's just since I'm mentioning it, let's move these around and then we'll just do that first. So for people new to this conversation, um, CIQ would like to see the kinds of things that are discussed in the Werewolf Slack as a potential source of, hey, maybe this is documentation we should write, or maybe these are blog posts we should do, or maybe this is evidence for improving the Werewolf like software code base. But because of the way the chat history goes away. Data mining that is not trivial. So CIQ has, I don't know much about it, but a thing called Common Room uh, that we would like to connect to the Werewolf Slack, which would ingest messages from public Slack rooms, not any DMs or anything like that, or the TSC room for what it's worth. Mostly just general and help. Um, and in return, CIQ would make a report, I think quarterly is what, yeah, would make a report quarterly to the TSC about what they have gathered, what we have gathered, and provide that information back to the committee. Um, this is the document. I think everyone in the TSC should have seen this already, or at least it's available in that channel. But what are people's thoughts in terms of accepting this and allowing CIQ to proceed? And for the purposes of voting, I think I would abstain and mostly just look to Christian and Tim to see if you have any concerns or if you would support. Sorry, I just said Christian and Tim, but also Jeremy, to see if any of you have any concerns or if you would consider this acceptable.
I don't have concern with it because it's kind of not what's in the most in the Slack channel that's community provided. So it's not really the stake of SUSE, it's more the stake of the community if it's okay for them. And perhaps we should set a sticky note in the channels that
Yeah,
it's recorded and
agreed.
that it's in common room that CIQ gets this information. Just to be fair, because it's not really it's not the work of SUSE. The work of SUSE it's from me and it's in the code base and it's already open source. And I would say it's better to share this data also not just in a closed channel, but also in a community channel. Perhaps
Yeah,
we should have really a TSC. We should perhaps try to make the TSC channel open and still have a kind of TSC private channel. That's okay. And really just share the really private things there.
well, I think CIQ providing this information to the TSC doesn't have to mean it's private. We could then just share it back out with the community, no problem.
Yeah, yeah. But then really have in the document that we share it back to the community because the community is contributing this really useful stuff, which
Yeah.
it's really great. So that's really a great thing about Werewolf that we have this active community, not now in the mailing list, but in the Slack channel.
All right. Tim or Jeremy, any thoughts or comments on this?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I voiced my concerns earlier, and they've been addressed.
Okay. Then I will report back to, well, I think mostly Rose, but also the people within CIQ that want to get this set up, that we are a go, and yeah, we'll consider the matter closed. All right. Next item for discussion is the 4.6.2 release, which for people that weren't in our last meeting is mostly hung up on getting provisioning to disk support merged. I had taken the original pull request from Christian and made some changes around
No, you didn't
most
make you completely rewrote it. That's
it's some
you took the
changes.
inspiration. That's okay. I'm pretty good with that. I'm
Your
kind of
commits are
weird.
still in the history.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So we had gotten direction from Greg that he wanted it to work with other systems than just Ignition. So I had added support for sfdisk, makefs, and makeswap as an alternative path, those three being required to replace Ignition. The primary feedback from this committee was that instead of configuring each of those individually and discretely, redundantly with how Ignition is configured, they should all be able to work from the same configuration source. So that is what I'm working on. There are a couple other much smaller things that need to be done also, but they are much smaller. And one of them is documentation. Uh, but I have been working on integrating support for the current, what I'm calling native disk configuration that's in the node and profile object. That is going reasonably well. The biggest impediment is that our configuration of those things inside of nodes.conf is based on maps. So it's the name of the partition to its data, for example. And frankly, Ignition, but also SFDisk, let's say, expect partitions to be presented as a list so that they can be ordered on the disk. So I am that was already being done a little bit in the Ignition, like the functions
The
that support.
ignition config we have in Werewolf is different than the one Ignition really expects.
Yeah.
The
So
thing is that it must be a list, but I thought a map would be better because then you have then if you have a map, then the devices and so are guaranteed unique.
the maps are also similar to what we were already doing with like network devices. So that
Right.
reasonably makes sense to me. Like when I was playing in my head with the idea of advocating at some point to change them to a list, I realized that then it would be different from network devices and all this. It's going to be fine. But I'm in the middle of it. I had a working prototype of the SF disk support that did all of the conversion in the template, but then the prospect of doing that in every template for MakeSwap and MakeFS just it seemed wrong. So I'm going back and porting the generation of the list to Golang in such a way that that can then be called from the template. And that's what I'm in the middle of right now. This is my primary task for the remainder of the day. And I have the day off tomorrow as well. So if I don't get it done today, I might work on it tomorrow also. But I don't have any concerns right now. We had talked about reevaluating our course on holding off on 462 until this is done for not this meeting, but the next meeting. If it's not done by then we would reevaluate. I do not currently think that will be an issue. I expect to have this done today or tomorrow, and then hopefully soon after, I will present it to Christian and it will meet with his approval, and then we will merge it. And I think there's a couple other small things that I want to merge for 462, but they're much smaller, like little bug fixes and things, and then we'll get a release out. So that's my current plan, my current expectation, but it is extendedly delayed. So I want to leave that open to both committee and community right now. Any further concerns or anything that you've seen since our last meeting that you want to make sure gets into a hopefully imminent 462? All right. Well, if that changes, please speak up in the development channel, and we'll see what we can do about getting stuff incorporated. Before we cut this release, I'm excited to get it out and excited to get this feature in. And frankly, I think that having it, like as much as I personally was originally against doing this with the native config, I am now increasingly on board with it. So I'm glad to be having this work in. And yeah, it was a really productive meeting last time that led to, I think, a better feature for everyone by the end of it. So shouldn't be too much longer now.
The only thing I'm still wondering if but I never tested this out. When we would add an EFI partition, would we then really be able to boot from EFI?
That is what I want to, that is my expectation for the next step off of this. I don't want to include it as a blocker for 462,
Yeah.
but I want to, once we
No,
have it all
I'm
in
just
there.
curious. It's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of because it's just a partition which must have this name and then you are done.
It's just a partition and then a config file that you dump in it.
Yeah,
And
right.
I have not looked at all into what it means to dump that config file into it, so I don't know.
I
But
have
that is my current expectation, is that we should be able to make it bootable with just an EFI
There
command.
will be some complicated things down the road, I think, because it's iffy, but
it's
it could
fairly
be very easy.
straightforward in terms of the mechanics. It's just configuring the config file because but I've done it quite a few times and it works pretty solid.
You've done it with Werewolf, or you've just done it in general?
I've done it in general. I've done
Okay.
containers to
Okay.
disk, and they'll boot just
Nice.
fine. You just need to be a little bit careful on how you how you edit the FS tab, how it's populated, and getting the partition names and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty straightforward. And
Awesome.
I have less experience, but usually if you just run the integrated grub config, it will do the right thing the next time and be fine. But so it'll boot okay with hard-coded grub configurations, and then from there it'll go look like a normal disk install.
So you do still have to have grub in the thing you're booting. I was imagining that we wouldn't even need grub, that we could just point EFI at the Linux shim, and then it should boot without it.
Yeah,
Yeah, the shim's got to go somewhere, right? So it's got to go to some bootloader. The
Okay.
alternative is that you would point it to a UFI, or not UFI, a UK unified kernel image,
Right.
which contains absolutely everything, but that, it's pretty new and
yeah, but
Okay.
the shim binary is within the boot partition. It's in the EFI partition, so you don't.
Yep.
You will have to set an EFI variable that it should create the shim boot EFI, but for the werewolf for werewolf we could still point into the network, and then we could modify our grub configuration to check the EFI partition if there's a shim on it. And then this would be just another boot entry which we could then create dynamically.
All of this will be fun to
Yeah,
actually
it will be
see
fun.
work once we have it in there to do. But yeah, we're getting real close. So the last thing here on this list, let me just pull this up. So not here. Werewolf and warewulf-node-images. People probably know. I guess I can close this this as well. So in addition to the main werewolf repository, we have a warewulf-node-images repository. And this thing generates images for these types of image. So we have Rocky Linux, Debian, Alma, Leap, CentOS, and Tumbleweed images that we build. But within, for example, the ones that I pay the most attention to, within Rocky Linux, we have not just 8 and 9, but 8 and 8.1 and 8. Well, not 8.1, like 8.6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 9 dot, I think 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're about to start building images for Rocky 10. And there's two issues here. One is something that Matt Hink has actually brought up to me in the past, that unless you have some kind of extended support contract from CIQ, if you deploy a .2 and you're not getting any security updates. So I think people generally know that, but maybe not. Maybe that's a surprise to them. But the other is just, it's a lot of images, and every time we build, like we make a change, it has to rebuild all of them. So next to the images that we build for real, so the directories out here are the images that we build for real, but next to that is an examples where we put like container files for how to do certain things that we don't actually build images and publish images for, sometimes for size reasons or complexity reasons or licensing reasons. Like here, we don't have a license to redistribute the Mellanox OFED, so we don't build an image, for example. I wanted to bring up the possibility that rather than actually building, let's say, Rocky Linux 9.2, which we do with, I think, that comes from container file vault, and then we build a version of this file that actually tags it for a specific release, we would just provide examples of how to do .release containers in the examples directory and then reduce our image, like our published image set to the like Rocky Linux 8, whatever the current latest is, Rocky Linux 9, whatever the current latest is, and the same for others. But that does mean it's a slightly less good out of the box experience for people who actually do want to run 9.4. I think I've told my piece for now, but I see your hand up, Tim. What do you think?
Yeah, in general, I like that idea. One thought is instead of publishing examples, just do it for the last dot release. Therefore, you know that it's actually going to work. And so you can freeze it on the last dot release.
So would you recommend having the last dot release and the rolling one, or only the last dot release?
The last dot release and the rolling one.
Okay. Let me come here.
And that way your quote unquote example is always active and somebody can go back and change it. The other thing I'm going to mention, somewhat related, I've caught a couple instances where it's been building Rocky images off of the old Rocky Linux container, which used to be in library, and that's really old.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in this repo, but I personally have found them in mine, and I'm trying to go through them and cleaning them all up. So just keep in the back of your mind to make sure that it points to Rocky Linux, not library Rocky Linux.
Yeah, I think all of ours do right now. And somewhat tangential to this conversation, that is a thing that CIQ is actively engaged with resolving. So that problem should hopefully go away in the relatively near future. But we've been wanting that to be the case for something like a year and a half now. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but it's not just languishing forever. But yes, understood. And I think all of our container files here do point to Rocky Linux/Rocky Linux. So my question to publishing the last dot release and the rolling is kind of a question, even if we weren't going to continue. Do we remove the previous dot releases from the GitHub container registry, or do we just leave them as whatever they were last built with if we do either of those?
I would keep them. Because if, for example, somebody kind of built at a given point in time a cluster and kind of messes up the image and doesn't have a backup, he could still pull the old release. And it's not something which costs us, it's just costs Microsoft some bucks, but I don't care about them.
Well, my main concern, so let's, for example, this isn't a thing that we're currently planning on doing to my knowledge, but at one point we were talking about putting ignition, like building an ignition package and putting it into the Rocky Linux 8 images. If we decided to do something like that and we were no longer rebuilding the previous dot releases, then those old images would not get the ignition package. Would we be okay with that kind of thing where we've made a change to how we're building the image, but those changes are only applied to the new images that we're pushing out?
Yeah, but
Is that
normally
acceptable?
you are pulling really the latest and not kind of some. If you want the old release, you really have to specify it explicitly.
And with
And people who are capable to do this, they want them.
And you have, if you're not ready to upgrade to the latest release, you'll always have the -1. So if something hits, 9.6 hits, and you want to wait a couple months before you do go to 9.6, you will still have the 9.5 always there.
Well, okay, so we're in a state right now where 9.6 is the current Rocky Linux 9. Your suggestion is that we should be actively maintaining a 9.5 image, a 9.6 image, and a 9 image?
Maybe I'm saying that, yes.
Okay.
You should be able to not have to go to the latest.
So this would at least keep us to 3 images per thing at most, which is a huge improvement. And at least then it's not ever growing.
Yeah.
I'm okay
you
with
did-
that.
If you ju- the reason I'm saying it is you want it, you typically would want to delay an upgrade until you feel that you're ready, right? To the next maintenance window, this, that, and the other. So you always need to have that previous one floating around. I'm not sure if you could accomplish it with just a -1 and the current. Because as soon as the current flips, as soon as the current goes to the next one, you'll still have that -1.
Yeah.
So you might be able to do it with just one previous dot release.
Yeah, I've written this incorrectly. Publish the current.
Previous. But the current could be the rolling one, right?
Yeah, the current would be roughly equivalent to the rolling one. It just then doesn't continue rolling.
I'm saying you choose the latest and then you have okay, yeah.
The point in time of the latest, and then like one that is latest, one that is point in time, like the actual version that latest happens to be right now.
Yeah, because folks may want to not always point it to latest. They may want to lock
Yeah.
it down. That's typically what I would do.
Yeah, me as well.
Except for, well, Mimi has latest because I want it to always be in development till, the latest, but production me would definitely not do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm fine with this as at least a reduction in what we're currently doing to simplify it. I think at that point I wouldn't even bother with examples because the example is in the thing of how to make a point release. You would just then modify it if you wanted a different point release and build your own. All right. That's everything on the agenda for today. Anything else that people would like to discuss before we perhaps call it at a quick and early meeting today? All right. Well, I'll continue working on the provision to disk updates, and Christian, I'll get that to you as soon as I can. And Tim, I think you've been reviewing them as well. So if you have time and interest to continue doing that and trying them out,
Yeah, and
always
since I have the
appreciated.
day off tomorrow as well, if you happen to get it done to me, I might be geeking out tomorrow on my little cluster. So
Wonderful.
Is this kind of Corpus Christi, or is it just unrelated?
No, so this is it is recently a national holiday. It has been a kind of cultural holiday for a while called Juneteenth that commemorates
Juneteenth.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
commemorates
That's-
the
the slaves one.
well, yeah, but the like the spreading of the knowledge of emancipation through the
Yeah, I
country.
know. No, here it's the June is really kind of May. It's always May or June where you have 2 Thursdays kind of, and because I'm Protestant, it's always Catholic, so I'm allowed to work.
Allowed to, yeah.
Yeah. So if it would be Protestant, I would not be allowed to work, and it's not. But here it's kind of, I don't know it, and it's really old one where they had the how is it called, the things which are where they take the relics. I
The
don't know what they
relics.
have, the
Yeah.
kind of bones from holy saints and
Sure.
things,
Yeah.
and show it to the fields that they grow and get better.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really interesting. But I cannot tell. I'm Protestant, so I don't know what they are really doing here. I'm just
Right.
taking the day off. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here, for your participation and continued leadership and guidance here in the community. We'll see. And well, real quick, I'll confirm the next meeting date. I think it is just 2 weeks from. Yes. So June 2nd is our next meeting, and hope to see you then.
Yeah. Okay. See you. Bye.